All right, we are back. Juliet, Alex, always a pleasure. I'm really excited for everything that we have to cover today. I mean, we got a lot of stuff on the docket, and I feel like every time we do this, it gets a little bit bigger, a little more in depth. And we got our homework from Professor Alex here to get ready, and it's time to go. But I think first of all, I want to get a little bit of update on the summer for you guys so far, and Juliet, you just came back from a very special trip, so maybe we'll save that for a second. And Alex, like, how's it been for you this summer so far?
It's been great. We were up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, living the lake life for 3 weeks. And it's kind of one of the highlights of our year because we get to reconnect with family, especially on my wife's side. And the lake life is great. I mean, Jackson's great too, but gets really busy in the summer. So it's nice to sit on the dock and watch the loons and ride my gravel bike and a kayak. And yeah, it's great. Anyway,
Lake life is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, I can attest to that for sure. Well, good to hear, Alex. Glad you have a great summer. And Juliet, you just got back from a very special, memorable trip. We're dying to hear about it. So, how was it?
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to be able to go see some events at the Olympics. And I'll be honest, we were already going to be in Europe for a different trip. And 3 weeks before the Olympics, we had this bug and realized, man, what are we doing if we're in Europe and we have an opportunity to go to the Olympics? We should go. And we assumed that cost would be the thing that would make that not happen.
Mm.
And I will say that I was blown away that we were able to find like a totally affordable Airbnb in a great neighborhood and get all resale tickets. And so we went to 4 events. And I'll start just by saying that Paris was the best. I mean, I already love Paris, but Paris was the best it could ever be. I mean, it was clean. Everybody was lovely. The streets were packed with people. I thought it was really interesting, actually, culturally. It seemed like the Parisians actually, nobody was home watching the Olympics. They would all go out to bars and restaurants and venues and watch all the events outside all night. And so the streets were just like a buzz. And then we went to 4 events, two medal water polo games. We were able to go to the men's beach volleyball gold medal final underneath the Eiffel Tower in that insane stadium.
Yeah.
And then we went to women's heavyweight weightlifting. So it was kind of this broad group of events, all medal finals. And, man, it was just so, I mean, the first thing was when we walked into the La Defense Arena. And I don't know if you guys were watching the Olympics the whole time, but leading up to going, I was watching a ton of Olympics. I love swimming and water polo, and just walking in the door felt so spectacular. I was like, oh my God, I've been watching this on TV for 2 weeks and now I'm standing right here. It's amazing. But yeah, I mean, I love sport, and gosh, why, being in the crowd, sitting next to parents watching their kids was like one of my great joys. I mean, just watching the parents like both be gripped and have joy. And I mean, that just watching, I mean, you could almost just watch the parents and not the sport. I mean, that alone is like a sport in of itself as a parent, and then we were able to watch one medal ceremony, and there wasn't even a USA team in the medals on the podium, and I still was crying. It was so moving, and just lots of amazing moments, and just such an example of like why we love sport and how unifying it is. And it was a blast. And so, I invited you guys before, but I'm going to rent a big house in LA in 2028 and invite everybody. And you can bring your laptop and record podcasts or whatever you need to do and go see events, because it's just awesome and just like really a peak life experience. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, yeah.
What about you, Eric? What have you been doing?
I have a thought. I will tell you in a minute. Did you have a favorite event? Any one moment that stood out?
Yeah, we watched the women's gold medal water polo match,
Oh,
and there were the women from Spain ended up winning the gold medal, and there were a few moments where a couple of the players who I later learned have been in multiple Olympics and never medaled before had some great plays, and then actually looked up into the crowd and were able to find their parents and their family, and like sort of have these in-game connections and cheering, both of which literally made me cry. I mean, I was like, I don't know why I was just like waterworks the whole time, but watching those interactions, just being on site to see those, you don't see those kinds of things on TV as much. And so I think that was my favorite. I think those moments were my favorite.
yeah. I watched that game. It ended up in shootout, right?
Yep.
Kind of heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my favorite, I don't know if you guys saw the, sorry, not to get into too much water polo, but that's my sport. I love it too. And the men's versus
Yeah.
Australia
Yeah.
game.
With Adrian, the USA goalie.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Amazing. Like
He's
that
like a
game was
legend.
amazing. Yeah, that guy's a stud. And they lost a player. Stupid call, my opinion, but pretty factual. It was a stupid call. And then they lost the player for the entire rest of the, like, I think it was a 6 minutes. He went down, ended up coming back, winning in shootout. It was awesome. I was so stoked to see those guys get a medal this
It
year.
was so, yeah, it was
Well done.
amazing. So yeah. And then the other sport that I don't know if you guys watched any of this, but maybe because I like water polo, I'd never really watched handball before. And I
Mm.
thought handball was kind of like racquetball, but
Oh
it's
no.
not. Handball is water polo on land.
Yeah.
So I had a grand old time watching it. It was great.
Yeah, it's funny. My wife, she was a scholarship athlete in college in Brazil, and she played team handball, and we somehow ended up together. Kind of.
What a cool sport. Like it's such a cool
Thank you,
sport.
CrossFit. Yeah, thank you,
Yeah,
CrossFit.
right?
She's the client.
Thank you, CrossFit.
Yeah, so in my summer, it's been pretty steady. To Alex's point last time, I was on a gravel ride and ran into a black bear and a cub just about a week ago. So that was pretty interesting and fun.
You too? That was
Yeah,
Alex last time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Were you carrying bear spray?
yeah. Both my buddy and I slammed on the brakes, and we were fine. I mean, they're gone by the time we got there. And other than that, just living the lifestyle. Getting out as much as I can here and enjoying the outdoors, but nothing huge. And I watched
Well,
a lot
one
of
thing I
Olympics.
want to say that's changed my life about doing these podcasts, guys, is that I actually already had found and had the tabs open on my computer for the earnings reports before Alex even sent them to us. And I was like, who am I? Who have I become? Because I already I have these already open on my computer. So anyway, thanks, guys.
Yeah. We're gonna have to get the Wall Street Journal soon. Well, we have a lot to cover today. Go ahead. Alex.
A couple things on the Olympics. What did you guys think of that? The American woman who won the cycling road race, who picked up
The
cycling.
Harvard, the Harvard venture
Oh, yeah.
capitalist who like picked up cycling a few years ago.
In
bonkers was that?
In Central Park, she started cycling.
Yeah, she went to like a cycling class. Yes. That blew my mind.
I'd like to
Hey.
see some insights into her physiology, right?
She was a rower at Harvard, so she's obviously a great athlete. But I just thought that was up against these women who are, the greatest cyclists of all times. From Belgium and Holland, and
and she crossed the finish line with like time to drink a cappuccino before anybody else even crossed the line.
She won.
Yeah.
It didn't seem like she knew she won. She didn't have radio and earpiece, and she didn't really celebrate. So anyway,
that was one of many moments that I watched that, and it was amazing.
In Australian breakdancing. I thought that was pretty
and I think I love Bob Roll, and I think Bob Roll was commentating that, and even they were like, wait, who is this again? Who's this? Like they couldn't believe it either, the commentators. So it was great.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, plenty to cover today, right? My notes are full. We have the earnings reports. We have Blink Fitness going bankrupt. So we can talk about that. We have MindBody online teasing that they're going public. We have a pretty solid conversation lining up about women's health, fitness, strength, and all those things. I know we've covered it before here, but I feel like it's worth even more conversation with some recent publications and the, now infamous or famous, I should say, not infamous, Huberman's Dr. Stacy Sims podcast. Like there's a lot of stuff going on in women's health and fitness that's really exciting. I think as an industry, we really need to be wrapping our arms around this because it's a big deal and should be talked about a lot. So I guess if we just going in order of how Alex sent it, which is how I do everything, should we start with Lifetime? What's the takeaways there? Anybody want to, Alex, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, sure. Okay. So I would say a quality performance on the financial side. They hit a 26% EBITDA margin, which is the highest they've ever produced, and way above what they guided towards which is about 23 or 24. So they're really firing on all cylinders. They did have free cash flow, which they promised they would in the second quarter. Not a lot, but they did have some. And the stock is up 59% year to date. So they're really, in a great position. And it's a testament, I think, to the resilience of management post-COVID and the strategy they put in place, the execution, and the stability of that management team. The founder's been there 30 years. He's still, CEO and chairman, and he's just doing an amazing job growing the business and improving it. And, it's interesting. He talks about not having salespeople and not doing any marketing because that's the experience and the power of the brand at this point. So he, the numbers he gave were, they were spending about a 1.5% on sales and marketing versus an industry standard of 5 to 6%. So, I don't know, I haven't shopped a Lifetime in a while, so I don't know how they sell when you walk in the doors. I don't know the process. But that's a big difference from how the industry has, still run in a lot of cases and has been run historically. So I thought those were some interesting takeaways.
How about you?
Yeah, the only thing I noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that they also had to invest money in renovating some facility they bought. I got way down in the weeds there in the report, but they were still spending money and yet still had these great results. So I thought that was extra cool to see because, it wasn't as though they just turned off the hose of spending altogether. They're still spending money and still seem to be doing well. So I don't know. Did I read that correctly?
They spend huge amounts of capital,
Yeah.
hundreds of millions of dollars, and they tamped it down a little bit, but not a lot. And I just think the business itself, everything is working. The personal training is growing, the membership dues lines are growing, the pickleball investments are paying off big time.
Huge. Do you think part of it, I was thinking about this because I don't think I've ever been to a Lifetime.
Me neither.
It's kind of a place that I drive by when I'm in certain geographic places. Do you think part of the key to their success is this choice of places where maybe there aren't a ton of other options? The one I think about is up just outside of Sacramento. I happen to drive by it when I'm going to Tahoe, and they've invested massively in pickleball courts. But my guess is it's like there might be a few little mini gyms around, but like that's kind of the gym to go to in that area.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they've been really smart about choosing locations like that where they're the one, which makes it easy to not do a lot of sales and marketing, right? If you want to go to the gym, that's the gym. I don't know if that's their strategy or.
Well, I'd say a couple of things. One, they need so much real estate, such a big footprint, that they kind of have to be a little bit on the periphery of communities. And then, and they only have 175 locations, so it's not
Right.
that many, and they can be selective certainly about, the competitive environment, but they claim they don't really compete because what they offer is just different and more extensive. And, that's probably hubris to some degree, but that's certainly what they say.
Yeah.
Alex, you said you gave them an A. Is there anything from your experience that would have gotten them an A+, just a perfect score on this?
Yeah, that's funny. I was thinking about whether it was an A+. They still are spending huge amounts of capital, and so they don't have a lot of free cash flow. They had about $25 million of free cash. And because they invest so much, the return on their capital is not as high as some of the franchising like Expo or Planet. So that's the challenge. If there was a way for them to generate the returns, the EBITDA that they're generating without spending the hundreds of millions of dollars on capital, that would be a plus. With interest rates coming down, that does help them, and generally across the board for the brick and mortars, lower interest rates are helping those businesses. You see it in the public markets with Xponential. Their stock is relatively strong given all the drama they've had, and Planet as well has bounced up a little bit as interest rates have come down. And anybody building brick and mortar facilities is going to benefit. Not everybody. If you're just putting in equity, it's different. But if you're getting an SBA loan, and paying 13-14% last year, and it's coming down, closer to 10 or 11, that helps you get your facility built.
Yeah, I mean, overall, when I was reading through this, I mean, I guess my major note was like, looks really good. It's kind of it's pretty good.
Yep.
I mean, I think that was the only thing I was like, yeah, they could stop spending, as much money or find different ways to leverage the capital, then they'd be in good news. And so Xponential, let's move on to that. I was kind of looking over a lot of things, not sure exactly what to make of it, was my big punchline here for myself as far as notes. But, I was realizing it's been over a year now since the Fuzzy Panda report. So, last June they're at $28. This June they're at 16 per share. So, obviously something, if you look at the year, it hasn't been, from that perspective, not the best, but it looks, there's a lot of different signals in the report. So what do you guys say?
The new CEO was on the call. So he's been in the seat for maybe 2 months. And remember, he comes out of Adidas, TaylorMade, and Taco Bell. I'm not sure why those three are in the same sentence, but they are. And so he's just getting settled in. It was too early for him to have clarity on what if anything he's going to change in their strategy. But I would say the focus sounded like it was going to be working with the brands that they have. So they have 8 brands left. They got rid of Row House, not got rid of, but spun off Row House, Stride, so the running one, and then AKT they're winding down. I'm not sure that ever got much oxygen. That was the dance cardio concept. But so they're going to focus on what they have. It sounds like the strength is really in Pilates and in the stretch lab, which is interesting, and maybe not a surprise to you guys. But I think Club Pilates is the star. I think there's weakness in Cycle Bar. That seems to be the one that they're closing a lot of. And they have increased the number of units that they're closing, especially in that modality. And I think across the industry, cycling is in a bit of a tough situation. But in terms of the numbers, I was pretty impressed with the key performance indicators. So their same store sales were up 7%, which is really strong. They expect 22% growth for the year. They did cut back a little bit on new openings, but they're still going to do 500 or so openings this year. So overall, I'd say the company seems it's in a strong position, but there's some sort of wrinkles there that could turn into weaker performance. I mean, if you have a portfolio of 8 brands and only 2 are really performing, 2 out of 8 is not long term. That's not going to work, because Pilates, as we all know, is amazingly strong and has been for the past couple of years. But trees don't grow to the sky, right? At some point, that's going to slow down.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I would add is I forgot until I reread this report that they'd added, and I forget when, but that weight loss brand, I think
Pandora.
it's Lindora. And to me, that's the one to watch in their
Mhm.
portfolio because, again, now there's so many of those. I just don't know if the market's been flooded and whether their particular one will be successful. But I also think, based on what I'm seeing, that has a lot of potential.
Yes.
And yeah, and I've seen, this is just, my own local experience, but a couple of cycle bars in our community have closed. So that's what I just noticed on the ground. But yeah, I thought the same thing. I thought it does feel like spinning was spinning in Soul Cycle, and I think even our local Soul Cycle closed down, which is not part of that brand, but I just thought maybe it said something about spinning overall. And so I'm super curious to see if the weight loss brand, what that does, if anything.
Yeah. It's kind of it's curious to me because I've always wondered over recent years how these single modality boutique concepts will do, the rowing, the running, the just cycling, like how long will people maintain a membership there when they can get everything they want at a nearby
Right.
health
At
club?
Lifetime.
Yeah, at Lifetime, right? And ironically, I talked to somebody in the upper management today from Lindora, and they just shifted over. They shifted over some pretty experienced and successful people, especially at the president level. And shout out to Lou. And so I think they're very. I mean, GLPs aren't going anywhere, right? Weight
Nope.
loss is not going anywhere, and if they could serve
Nope.
that correctly and get all the, I imagine there's a lot of red tape when it comes to medical on that side that you have to go state by state and get through. But if you can get through that, I mean, it's not just about weight loss too. It's vanity, right? Like a lot of people, specific areas are going to pay a lot for that kind of thing. So I
Yeah.
think it's super interesting to watch. And yeah, I'm curious what you guys think about the state of overall of boutique fitness, right? Is it flattening out? Because there was such a surge in just so many modalities and it was so trendy and people were willing to spend so much money. And now it seems like it's quieting a little bit. The cost of real estate's up, the interest rates are high. What do you guys overall think of boutique right now? Is it hot, cold, lukewarm? What do you say?
Julia,
Seems to me like the pendulum is swinging back more towards people wanting the full service gym experience for all the reasons you said. I think even with CrossFit, I think it's a problem for CrossFit too, but the people that I know who like boutique fitness and still do it tend to do 2 days a week at Orange Theory, and then they go to Club Pilates, and then they go here. And I know ClassPass has tried to solve that problem sort of, but it hasn't been a perfect solution for the sort of boutique fitness goers. And I'm seeing just in my own community more and more people, joining the Bay clubs and the bigger gyms because they like spinning, but that's not all they want to do. They maybe want to do that 2 or 3 times a month, and they want to be able to have access to yoga and, have a cup of coffee and talk to their friends at their gym, the social piece. So yeah, it seems to me that there's a correction a bit where people are wanting the more full service gym experience. And then, we're going to get to the Stacy Sims podcast, but I thought that from a women's perspective, she gave a pretty blistering non-review of Orange Theory and berries for women in particular, right?
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, she definitely did not mince words in saying like, yeah, those programs are exactly not what most women need to be doing.
Yep.
Again, I have no idea if her single podcast with Huberman will have an impact on their numbers, but if I were Orange Theory and I think it was berries she mentioned, I forget
I think
the
it was
two.
at 45.
Soul Cycle.
F45. Yeah, it was F4. Anyway, so yeah, I think that those things all combined make me wonder if we're going to start to see more of those boutique fitnesses peel away, especially the single modality. I feel like the rowing, as a former rower myself, I was like, how are these things ever going to survive? Sitting on a rowing machine is hard and not that fun. It's hard to make it fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Alex? Or Eric?
Well, I think that, Barry's is for sale. Solid core is for sale. The owners obviously think that this is a good time to sell. There are lots of different reasons to sell. It could be that, North Castle's owned Barry's for a long time, which they have, and they need liquidity. Their LPs want, return of capital, which, would make sense. The solid core owners may think, well, we're kind of at the top of the wave here. We should get out while the getting is good. So you never really know why people are selling. But if you get some really good results on those sales, that will incentivize investment in boutique, because people will say, "Oh, that person invested in Barry's, they got a 10x return. What's the next Barry's, or what's the next solid core?" So it used to be that it was pretty much just the Globo gyms and the yoga studios, right? And then you had the explosion in boutique and all sorts of different modalities. So do we go back to where it's kind of Globo gyms and some sprinkling of boutiques? I don't think so. We'll maybe go back a little bit, but I think there's an expertise and a community and a convenience to going to a boutique that you don't have. Like, you go to Lifetime, you're spending like 3 hours to just like park and get to the front door. And then,
Right. And then you might have to
the locker
compete
room
for the machine you want. And
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think boutiques will hang in there, especially if we get some good exits.
Yeah.
I just would add one more thing before you go, Eric, too, as a plug for CrossFit. When I still owned a CrossFit gym, we actually we owned it for long enough that we would, see some of those swings where people would leave and come back. And when people came back, their primary reason was coaching. They would go away to these other things, oftentimes Globo gyms, and just miss actually getting technique coaching and, you know, and showing up and just having someone program and have a plan and tell you what to do from moment to moment to moment. So we noticed that. And I do think that's never going to go away. There's going to be a subset of people who do want coaching.
Yeah.
And, the Globo gyms tend, unless you have a personal trainer, but, if you're just attending, it's pretty much a DIY kind of situation. And so I think that's going to keep people doing more boutique stuff as well, especially CrossFit.
Yeah, I would agree. I think BFT is on my mind. Yeah. So my thoughts on boutique is like, it's kind of like the experimental aspect of our industry. It's like people get to try new concepts. They can serve their community in a very distinct way. And then some of them rise, some of them don't, and some of them scale massively. But I do think, as we move forward, just as the stuff we're going to talk about later too, is like anything around strength right now, CrossFit, right? Metabolic, BFT, like some of these ones where it's like, okay, you get coaching, you get strength, you get these things that people are really dying for. And I don't see those trends going away anytime soon. I think they're in a really good position. So yeah. Let's see what's next. We got Peloton,
Planet?
I like to say for the end. Planet Fitness.
Yeah. So
All
Planet,
up, all good. Is that right?
Planet it's doing fine. I mean, it's up 4% same store sales. So that's not as good as Lifetime, which was 12%. And Expo was 7%. But 4% same store is still pretty good. And, they slowed down a little bit this year, but that was a function of construction costs mainly, that franchisees were slower to build because they couldn't get their construction budgets in line with what the model requires. They have changed the model and the franchisees have signed off. I haven't seen the financials on the new model, but they did. One of the key changes was to take into account that construction costs were up 30% since 2019. And so that's why they raised the basic price from $10 to $15 to give the franchisees just, higher revenue and a little bit more profitability to get a return on the higher investment. So the new CEO, Colleen Keating, who comes out of hospitality, had her first call earnings call. And again, too early to talk about strategy too much. But what she did say, one of the things she said was that there's going to be more focus on international expansion. And in her first 6 weeks, she already spent time in Europe, which makes me think either she was on vacation or there was, she's scouting. I think they're opening clubs in Spain. That's the first market, and it's underpenetrated. It's only, I think, 10% of the population uses a club versus 20% in the US. So I think international is a focus. And I think that she talked a lot about improving or focusing on the overall experience in the gyms, and the need to make sure that it's just an unparalleled experience. And to me, I'm sort of scratching my head, like, how do you make a bare bones club an unparalleled experience?
Yeah.
There's no classes. I don't think they do personal training. They don't. There's almost nobody on the floor, employee wise. The one thing that people complain about is how hard it is to cancel your Planet Fitness membership.
Oh, really?
So maybe you should figure out a way to make it easier to cancel memberships. Anyway, I don't want to be snarky.
I think they're having an unparalleled experience in monthly membership cost. They're definitely having that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That helps.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's she's new, and new to the industry, new to Planet. She'll figure out, how to elevate the experience in some way, I'm sure. But I don't know that there's that much you can do when you have no payroll line to speak of. So she talked about strength taking more, floor space, and the Gen Z demographic being the most important one. And I thought that was interesting. And then, so overall fine, financially, and they're getting used to their new. We'll see what the new CEO has in terms of strategy over the next few calls.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Any other takeaways for you, Juliet?
Not much. I mean, it just seemed fine to me. The only thing I noticed in light of our Blink conversation is I did read somewhere that they were going to focus on some smaller format gyms, which I assume smaller format means smaller, like in size. And I thought, well, maybe that's not the best idea based on what we're seeing from Blink. So, I don't know if I would have made that connection if we didn't already have this plan, but I thought that was interesting. That was the kind of note I took out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I didn't have too many other notes on it, honestly. I think it was just Alex has said is right. We're going to wait a couple more quarters, see what the new CEO does and what changes she makes. I think we'll have a lot more to talk about. So that brings us to Peloton then. Doing more with less. Is that the headline for Peloton now? I mean, I enjoy their reports out of all of them, the way they write them and everything, just the formatting. And I think they paint a good picture, even when it's not so great. But I don't know. I was going through, I was like, okay, yeah, all right, cool. Good for them. They seem to be, maybe they're listening to our podcast. I don't know, but it seems like
they're listening to people who are saying the same thing that we've been saying. And it could be the board, it could be analysts, it could be us, but they don't have a CEO now. They're looking, they say by the next call, they'll have somebody in the corner office, but we'll see what direction they want to go when they do have that. But I think my sense is that the company is really cutting expenses in across the board, R&D, marketing, just retail. They're doing it. They're going even deeper after they've already gone through 3 or 4 rounds of cuts. And it just gives you a sense of how much bloat there was
Oh my God.
under,
Yeah.
during COVID.
Yeah.
They built this Taj Mahal corporate office in Manhattan. They bought factories, and so there's still expense to be shed, and they're going to continue doing that. It sounded to me like the CFO was running the show, which is, it probably makes sense given the stage they're at, and they have two interim CEOs, so those folks are just keeping the seat warm, but they're not going to be there very long. So they're very much focused on profitability and solid financial footing. And I think they did extend all their debt to 2029. So that's a big help. They don't have that hanging over their heads where, there was a bankruptcy concern before that these debts were going to just kind of, they were going to suffocate on them. And I don't think that's going to happen anymore. They teased a price increase on the subscription. So I think they're at $44 a month. I would not be surprised if that went up, but probably not till the new CEO comes in. And I think, he talked a lot about strengths and that was a modality that they their customers were really engaged with. It's not really an equipment based thing, right? So it's more content, I guess. But churn is up a little bit, not dramatically though. And so I think we wait for the new CEO, and in the interim, they're not going to really grow. Like the macro view was connected fitness is still declining. It hasn't recovered, and certainly hasn't recovered, and it hasn't even sort of plateaued yet. So it's still going down a little bit. They're on a different fiscal year, so they gave the 2025 projections or guidance, and they don't expect to grow. They're expect to be flat revenue wise, and may even go down a little.
Interesting. Julia, what did you pick out of that?
I don't have much to add to that. I mean, I loved the clip. There was like a 4-minute clip you sent from CNBC or Bloomberg or something.
Yeah.
And I love that guy. I mean, I thought he did a great job of just saying, they're making money.
Simon
they have
Siegel,
this,
right?
yeah, they're making money. They have this very profitable arm of their business and they just need to figure out how to spend less money. I mean, that's sort of, and then I did think, and I was glad to see, because it makes, we have talked in the past about their sort of whack-a-mole, like partnership strategy and adding new things. And I was happy to see the bike rental thing seems to be working somewhere in the UK. And that model actually makes sense to me, knowing 1,000 people who were saddled with a Peloton they owned and no longer wanted. And the, gigantic market for them on Facebook Marketplace and other places. So, I mean, the bike rental thing makes sense. It sort of keeps their focus of their business on their app and that side of their business, which continues to be great and slay. So I thought that was an interesting idea, and I wonder if that'll work for them on the long term and be profitable at all.
Yeah, it was to that note too. I really like how they are embracing the secondary market and monetizing on it. So one of the things in there, it said we're initiating a new one-time $95 US used equipment fee activation.
Yep.
And they offer a virtual custom fitting for members, and then they get a history summary on the pre-owned hardware. So it's like they're really making it good for these things to stay in circulation and continue to make money, and not just become, clothes hangers somewhere, right? Which happens with a lot of home equipment. And I really like their, seem to be leaning more into their B2B strategy, because I think at large health clubs, why not have a Peloton in there with all the content and all that versus just, some other kind of bike. People know Peloton. They like Peloton. It'll draw people to the club, I think. So really interesting stuff. And yeah, I'm excited now. They've kind of looks like they're starting to right the ship from an expense standpoint and lean up. I think, who knows, this thing could be around for a while.
Yeah. I mean, they need a really good CEO.
Yeah.
It's still a tough business to grow.
Yeah.
Cutting expenses will, at some point you run out of, you start cutting
Things to cut.
Yeah.
or you start cutting, muscle and bone, and that's painful.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. How about Blink? So Equinox owned. I think I'm always curious. I'm not bankruptcy can mean so many things. It doesn't actually mean that everything's going out of business, right? But yeah, what was your guys' initial take on that? What does it mean for the market?
I'll be honest, until we started talking about this, I'd never even heard of Blink.
Same.
So I had to do some recon. I'm like, what is Blink?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I thought about it in the context of our women's strength and, strength conversation that's coming up next. I was sort of surprised to hear that and maybe it just maybe it just could never recover from the pandemic. I mean, maybe that's ultimately the problem. And that if it had just come to market in 2023 versus whenever it did, maybe it would still be successful. I don't know. I honestly wasn't sure what to make of it because I was so unfamiliar with the brand and the concept. So I don't think I have a ton to add other than that it seemed like it was a timing problem to me.
Alex?
Yeah, a little hard to say what the primary cause was of the bankruptcy. I think if you go back to the founding of Blink 13, 2011, I want to say, Equinox was firing on all cylinders. SoulCycle was doing great. They had more cash, getting thrown off than they knew what to do with. And they were like, okay, we need another avenue of growth, another brand. And so they looked around and were like, okay, you got Planet Fitness doing this and retro, and we can do that better. I think that there was that assumption that we're Equinox, we can, we can figure this model out and do it better. And then I think they built mainly in the New York area and in metro areas that were probably more expensive than where your typical planets are. And then I guess, the model just didn't pencil. The amount of revenue just wasn't sufficient to make, better HVLP work. And then also they never really franchised. So, and that was most successful HVLPs franchise, like Planet and Crunch. And I don't think EOS does, but so I don't know. That may have been a factor. They may have had too many units that were especially hard hit by COVID shutdowns. That's possible. So I don't really, that's not I'm not altogether clear on what the primary causes are, but it is a little surprising to me, given how planets bounce back and EOS is growing like crazy and Crunch is growing like crazy with their HVLP. I was a little surprised that Blink was filing Chapter 11. It'll get sold off presumably and rebranded maybe or not. We'll see. It's going to happen quickly though.
Yeah. I mean, outside looking in, my first thought when reading it and realizing it was Equinox owned was like, well, it seems a stark contrast as far as branding goes because Equinox is known for exclusive, right?
Yeah.
This is literally says inclusive and accessible. You're like, kind of guys are overreaching to a brand extension that may not be within your wheelhouse,
Yep.
But that's just, just outside looking in. So how about MindBody? I don't know if there's a whole lot to report here, but they did report that they plan on going public the next 12 to 18 months. And, given what we've seen in our industry about companies going public, my first reaction was why? But then I don't know. I mean, they're a tech company, right? Is this a little bit different? I mean, what do you guys initial thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Suspicion, one explanation I would, propose is they wanted to say to the potential buyers of the company, like private equity, specifically, we're doing really well. We're positioning ourselves to go public. And it's just so far off. It doesn't seem very meaningful. And it's pretty unusual. Normally CEOs don't talk about IPOs that far off.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the same thing you did, Eric. I was like, why would they do that? Number one.
Yeah.
And then number two, I also was like, wait, is this, does feel to me, I mean, granted, it's in our space, but it does feel like a tech company and so different from these other brick and mortar companies that were always, well, Peloton, I guess, is a tech company at this point, but it feels markedly different from those companies. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know anything about the strategy around that, but that does make sense to me what you're saying, Alex. That if they're not going to do it soon, they're not doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Well, let's get into the kind of one we've been teasing here for a bit. So women's health, women's fitness, women's strength, whatever you want to call it. It's about women right now. And, I'll go on record and say, I think this is, the biggest opportunity our industry has right now and for at least the next 10 years, because it doesn't take much additional investment. Um, the science and the knowledge and the desire and the need is there immediately. And you don't have to go like changing your gym around. You don't have to go doing a whole lot. You just got to change a little bit of your coaching style, change a little bit of your programming, maybe a little bit of equipment, and you can really serve. And yeah, I think we talked about the Stacy Sims and Huberman podcast, which was like well over 3 hours long, and I got the opportunity to interview Stacy about 2 weeks ago. So it hasn't been released; it won't be released until Q1 on Tech News. But she was telling me that I had to cut it down; it was about an hour longer. So the conversation was long, and she kind of schooled Andrew Huberman in many ways about things that he was had very, very big blind spots. And I'm not criticizing Dr. Huberman. I think that's the general public, because we have a lot of blind spots when it comes to women's health. So I'll take one more thing and then I'll let you guys rip on this, because I think I'm really keen to see what you have to say. But a lot of people, I'm 47 now, a lot of people very close to me are going through certain phases of life. And I've seen, them make, significant health changes that I wouldn't have been able to coach 10 years ago when I was coaching. Right. And now seeing like the advancement and then people, the desire and the need for that specific age group. And I'll just say women over 40 specifically, takes a lot of change, right, to keep them on track to be healthy and where they want to be in their bodies and their lives and activity and all those things. So really, really cool time. I think it's a very optimistic trend line that we're seeing. And it's something that I think is really exciting. So that's my initial thoughts, but I'll let you guys take away. And Juliet, why don't you start on this one?
Sure. I'll just start by saying it. I treated the Huberman and Sims podcast like an audiobook and
Yeah.
took me like almost a week and a half to get through it in chapters, I would say. I listened to it like in chapters. So if anyone is intimidated by listening to it, it's well worth it, but it does require some investment, maybe not all at once, unless you happen to be lucky enough to go on a road trip. And yeah, so I mean, Stacy's a friend of mine, so I was so excited to see that and just the massive reach that got. And, just her sort of chipping away at some pervasive myths that are, going on and, you know, disabusing many of us of those myths in the fitness space as they relate to women. So I thought that was in particular great. And, what I see is from a business perspective that this is a
Yes.
massive opportunity, because I do think despite the uptick of information, there's still a lot of concern and reticence among women, and even for the women who have kind of gotten over the hump and think, okay, I do need to strength train. There's still a lot of concern and confusion about how to do it, where to do it, how much, what's going to work. And I think that's where the fitness community can really meet those women with really good programming and coaching and classes and, styles of coaching that work for women. So I mean, I think it's a massive opportunity because, women are definitely curious, and it's still going to take a long time to bust the myth of, I don't want to get bulky. That is still very real and very pervasive, and it's still going to take a lot of work by the Stacys of the world to dispel that. But I agree with you. I think it's exciting, and I think it's a gigantic business opportunity for people who see it for what it is.
Alex.
So where is the business opportunity? I guess that would be my question.
Yeah, those are good questions. Yeah, those are all Yeah, Alloy and those companies are all, designed to mostly help women with menopause hormone therapy
Mhm.
and other sort of menopause specific things. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a separate conversation, and that is going to be a slaying business in and of itself. Yeah, I mean, I don't know yet. I What I know is I think there's a massive amount of interest by women in strength training. I think what's out there isn't serving them, or they don't relate to it. I try to funnel as many of those women as I can who are new to strength training into CrossFit, but that's a hard sell. And then what they also don't want to do is go to Lifetime and lift weights on their own. So I don't know. I don't know. And I think that the worst case scenario I always think about is, we don't need a curves, right? Remember curves, which is sort of attempting to do strength training for women in that weird way that curves was doing. Yeah. And I don't think women necessarily want to go to women only gyms, but I do think at the very basic, every gym should be offering basic strength and conditioning for women, because I think that that's one of the biggest problems is most women have never put their hand on a barbell or a pair of dumbbells, or the biggest dumbbells they've ever touched are the 1 pound ones attached to the back of their Peloton. So I think, yeah, I mean, and you may be right, Alex. I mean, maybe there's really no money in it from a business perspective.
Okay, so we were talking about the business models. Now, I have an idea. So, as I was telling you about how to do business, my peer group, I've seen an 8-week program, and I wish I could remember the name of the coach, but I can't. So I apologize to her. But it's gone viral amongst my peer group of women in this age group who are now looking and feeling great. And there's a lot of things that go into it. And I think it comes down to number one, education, understanding and resetting hormones, maybe, especially cortisol. Certainly you can get into a lot of supplementation, basic nutrition things like, are you eating enough protein? And then the training. So getting into just kind of basic, you know, fundamental weight training, especially reps and lifting heavy and educating like Stacy Sims talks about reps in reserve. So I think if you can develop programs for sure that are probably somewhere between, 6 to 10 weeks where you can help essentially women within perimenopausal and menopausal state phases, like re-educate and reset things. And I think that's really valuable because it does take, as Dr. Stacy Sims said in my interview with her and the one she did is like when men age in a linear fashion,
Hmm.
right? Women have significant changes at a couple points in their lives where they have to kind of reestablish new habits, reestablish new training, nutrition. And the cortisol thing has been really interesting. I mean, I think the 4 or 5 women I know who've gone through this program gave up coffee for a while, caffeine, and that really affected how their cortisol, they start sleeping more just overall, but their body composition changed. And the thing I kept hearing them say, as I would hear them in side conversations that I wasn't part of, was like, I feel like I have control again. And that I think is something that it's a distinct problem. You can figure out the language from a marketing standpoint. You can run a good program, and just adjust their needs. And there's a young lady who runs her own gym here, a little boutique personal training studio. And we've been talking. I really hope to have an opportunity to help her develop a program like that here locally, because I think it'll do it really well. So I think there is business opportunities. And I hate to do things in a 6 to 10 week increment, but I think this is actually quite appropriate where you could start running these programs and then, educate. And then hopefully they're people go through the program are self-sustaining. They now have the knowledge and training to go forward and adapt their life to these changes and do some massive good. So that's my thought on the business model. I think it's out there, and I think it's pretty attainable.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot. And by the way, will you send me that? Because I have about 50 women I'd love to send that to if you
Yeah.
know what it is.
Right.
I'm like, if you could send me that, that'd be great. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what I think people are looking, curious, don't know what to do, looking for guidance. And right now, what's available from a brick and mortar standpoint is either too not enough coaching and support, or seems too extreme for women like CrossFit. Many women will just never go. In my experience, it's just too scary for them. So yeah, maybe some kind of program like that is exactly what they need. And times 10,000, because there's so many people who want to feel better in their bodies, especially at this particular phase. So
Yeah. Well,
I
I think
think
it's coaching,
it's
right?
coaching.
It's
It's
coaching.
coaching. Yeah. And it's no different than youth athletes. I mean, I think that's always the advice I give for parents who are seeking out strength and conditioning for youth athletes, which is so important and a struggle as well, is that people need coaching. And kids, weightlifting is not dangerous for kids if it's done in a coached environment. And I think the same is true for women who've never lifted weights before.
Yeah. Well, I also think that the coaches have the opportunity to really arm themselves with new sets of knowledge that maybe like I was joking in a recent interview, like 8 years ago, I was sitting in what I think was a very high quality education program that did a lot of strength, a lot of nutrition. I won't say who it is, but I'm sure Juliet, you probably know.
Yeah.
And we would talk about, okay, well, what about the nuances of training the female athlete or the female client? And it was like, well, you should ask them about their menstrual cycle. That was about it.
hmm
How's your menstrual cycle?
Yep.
Good. Okay, great. Then that was it.
Good
That was
talk.
it. So like,
Good
what do you
talk.
do with that? Right. So I think now we have this huge opportunity where the education expanding so quickly that if
Yeah.
coaches and trainers really want to take advantage of getting in there and learning it from people like Dr. Stacy Sims or a lot of other people out there. And, there's a huge opportunity to develop programs around that knowledge now. And the language and the need and the desire is absolutely there. The pocketbooks are there, right?
hmm
For sure. So I don't think it's big tweaks. It's just a matter of the knowledge is out there. You just got to go get it.
Is the curriculum pretty well established for around that? That's a totally ignorant question on my part because I haven't done any research on it. But if you are a trainer at Equinox or something, and you're like, okay, I want to become an expert on training my women, female clients, 45 to 55. What is the education that I need to do that?
I mean, I think that's a great question. I mean, I will say a lot of the strength and conditioning piece of it is the same. I think as long as you have the right kind of coach who understands how to scale and, you know, teach people progressively, I think it's very similar. I think the method is similar. But yeah, how exactly, and I don't know whether that's going to be in technology, how coaches can leverage technology or other resources or education to actually be able to know what the next step is from a question like how's your menstrual cycle, right? How to consider that in training. But I do think just that alone, there's space for education because I do know women can handle and do different, the training should be the considerations and training should be different depending on where they are in their cycle. And, the most sophisticated coaches among us will know what that is. So there's certainly an opportunity there from an education standpoint for coaches. And I think the big opportunity is in private coaching and personal training as well, because to me, that's where, that's how we professionalize the industry. And that's where, that's where coaches actually make money. No coaches make money from teaching classes, or at least in my experience, they don't. And if there's this whole new market of women who are ready to learn and have money, like you said, Eric, in that, I mean, that's a big opportunity for private coaches and personal trainers, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
think
was
private, small group training, things like that of peers, like going through the same things are really powerful. And just the fact that we're asking that question, once again, presents a huge opportunity. It's like, well, where is the leading education and training, women 40 and over? I know, I think Sims has some stuff. Yeah, she has some courses that you can take.
Yeah, she does.
Yeah, I'm sure they're
Yeah.
excellent.
Yeah,
I'm taking them.
I listened to one section a couple times where they were focused on training for longevity for women over 50. And part of that was Huberman's sort of skepticism that women could actually would actually want to do the intensity that Dr. Sims was suggesting. And there's sort of an on-ramp needed. And the on-ramp that she was talking about was Planet Fitness, actually, just like getting the on the circuit at a Planet Fitness. So no instruction really, but just, 2 or 3 times a week, doing a circuit. And that struck me as that could really work for a lot of people. right?
Yeah. I mean, you have to start somewhere. And, to the extent everybody does not have the resources to be able to hire a personal trainer or pay for an expensive online program, I mean, man, that's an amazing option. The other thing that Stacy and I are currently having a side text about, because she's really the only voice in this that is using this word, is that women in this age category need to lift heavy.
Mhm.
And I'm texting with her saying, hey, we need to define heavy. And she said, yeah, well, I was trying to do that a bit with the reps in reserve on the Huberman Lab podcast. And I said, I love that. And that makes sense to me. I'm a lifelong athlete and I started lifting weights when I was 13. And I don't really even think in reps in reserve. So I fear that may be too complicated, way too complicated for the brand new lifter and definitely non-athlete. And so we're having a side text right now, brainstorming about how do we define what heavy means, because I do see, the concern I have is that there is a subset of women who are getting the message they should strength train, but to them that means, lifting the 1 pound dumbbells overhead from their Peloton. And, I fear that that is not going to get the results they want. So they're going to stop doing any strength training. So how do we define what heavy lifting means, especially for the brand new? I think that's an open question.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, if I had to throw a guess at that, is that it means educating on the movement themselves, because bicep curls, sure, you can get heavy curls, dumbbells, but you're not lifting heavy, right? So it has to be like the compound movements. So maybe teaching them more like, okay, well, we'll get to lifting heavy, what that means, but you got to learn how to press, deadlift,
Yeah, learn how to move. Yeah.
learn how to move, right? And then I think that's where maybe some of these circuits could be useful. I cringed originally when you said that, Alex, about that doing the circuit on their own, and I'm like, okay, that's just me being, you know, the arrogant fitness guy. Like, no, you're right. If they can't afford a personal trainer or a program or something like that, then it's really useful. And yeah, I
Well,
think,
that's my global gym background.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
You know, it's got to be accessible to a lot of people, because otherwise it's just not going to break through.
yeah, whatever it is, there's stuff to figure out. Obviously, like we haven't
Mhm.
figured it all out on this call or this interview, but I think there's still really, just from what I've seen in the conversations I've had with trainers and coaches who are doing this type of work, I'm like, there's something here, and I keep encouraging them to really, really lean into it. Like, seek out the education, be a leader. Maybe, you only have to be one chapter ahead in the book to teach people about it. So you don't have to finish the whole thing. So you can take what you've learned and see what works and kind of pass that along. So I just think if we, as a community, this is something where I feel like the fitness community can really do some good. And yeah, I mean, that's my initial thought. And Julia, I want to ask you this question because I asked your husband this question, and I want to see what your answer is. Right.
I
This is
can't
really,
wait.
yeah. So, and this is going to be interesting for you too, Alex. So if you were going to open another gym, right? If that's ever something you wanted to do, what would that model look like?
Yeah, so we talk about all the time. One of the things we never drive anywhere without seeing pieces of real estate and saying to each other, that'd be a great gym. That'd be a great gym. I mean, it doesn't matter. Like, we were just on a road trip in the Pyrenees in Spain and we saw like 10 buildings. We're like, that'd be a great gym. Like, we were stuck on that. I would rather, and I feel bad saying this in a way because my general mission in life is to make health more accessible and relatable to more people. But were I to do it from a business standpoint, I think I would open a small, expensive gym with a smaller number of members and more of a high level of service. I wouldn't really want to open like a fancy longevity gym like a lot of people are opening. That doesn't appeal to me. It would still be in its basis would be in strength and conditioning, but smaller, more tailored, and way more expensive. What did
Interesting.
he say?
Oh, you
Was
want to
he
know?
want to open like a Planet Fitness?
No, no. No, it wasn't too dissimilar. He said he would focus something really specifically on strength, teaching, and especially youth, and maybe even leaning a little bit more into young female youth strength training.
Yeah.
So not
Yeah.
too far away from you said. And Alex, I mean, you coming from kind of the big gym area, like what if you got the
Yes.
urge to do it
Start
again?
again, Alex. Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it. This is my pitch to you guys. Actually, I'm gonna send you a proposal right after
You
this.
know, I am really interested in making fitness more accessible to people, and not and more outcome, focused and more accountable. And I think the personal trainer, high touch, expensive model, can do a lot of things, but it's not accessible
No.
to most people. So how do we make things more accessible? Can we use technology, assessment tools, and reduce the amount of human in the loop so that the cost is more reasonable to people? The $40,000 longevity program at Equinox is amazing if you can afford it, but
Right.
then, you know, the Canyon Ranch $20,000 a week thing is great, but so how do we make things more affordable and accessible, and then outcome oriented, where the owners of the gym, the studio, have responsibility to deliver outcomes, and if they don't, then they don't get paid. You know, that's assuming that
I like that.
Yeah.
assuming the client does what he or she is supposed to do. We are the experts. We give the client's plan. We measure, we assess, we progress. If they're not meeting their objectives, then we don't get paid. It's pie in the sky. It's not going to happen. I realize that. But the accountability thing, to me, has to go both ways. And the industry traditionally it's only gone one way. And, if you succeed, that's great. If you don't, it's probably your fault. And, we keep money. So that would be I'll get off my soapbox, but that would be my model.
One more thing, Eric, I would like to slightly editorialize. Our friend Mark Bell has for years owned a free gym, and that would be cool. We have a little gym here in our studio, our office, and we do open it up to a very small number of people who are able to exercise here for free. But I love Mark Bell's model. I mean, he has this gigantic gym in Sacramento, and it's not open all the time. It's not, you can't come whenever you want. There's these specific times where people can come. But man, it would be cool, as a retiree, to have the funds to be able to just operate a gym and say, hey, come use it. That would be that'd be the real dream.
Yeah. I know some other people who do that, are pretty far along in their coaching career. And it's like, it's the gym you want. Right. And
everybody sweeps up the chalk because they care, and, they know they're coming for free. And I think that'd be fun.
Yeah. That'd be super fun. Yeah.
Not a great business model though, but it'd be fun.
Yeah. Well, awesome, you guys. I think that's we've covered quite a bit of ground today, and really appreciate any closing thoughts or comments on anything. Alex, what do you got?
No, we didn't talk about the GLP-1s, which is the gift that keeps giving. And the one thing I wanted to put on your radar, obesity rates are off the charts and keep going up. With GLP-1s, are we going to see that change? Are we going to see some data that says obesity rates are actually starting to come down a little bit? That would be wonderful. And given the number of people using them, do we? Let's keep our fingers crossed that we do see some progress on that front.
Yeah, I agree. In fact, we were just on a podcast earlier today with a guy, Di Manuel, up in Vancouver. You probably know who he is. I saw him, talk to him this morning, and he said that he's been back on the train, researching obesity rates. And he said just as soon as yesterday, he was doing current research, and all the numbers are still on the up, which did make me wonder if GLP-1s are being used, but by people who weren't obese to begin with and have money, that they haven't gotten yet into the hands of people who really need them. So I think that's interesting. But I think this is a fascinating topic, and maybe we can put a pin in it for next time, because I think we're going to have to keep discussing it for years to come. It's a big deal.
Yeah, we're just getting started, especially when it's, being talked about with its application towards addiction as well. So we'll see. Well, guys, thank you for all this. Always a pleasure.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, always fun to talk to you guys.
Yeah, you too.